So, Kate, I'm so excited that you're here with me today. Why don't we start with you telling me and our listeners a little bit about your story?
Sure. Well, I'm, a physician in the Portland area. I work as a hospitalist. The first time anyone ever called me resilient was when I was a teenager. It was my aunt, and she was like, I was in high school, and she was just telling me that she was so admiring how resilient I was. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm a teenager. You're a lawyer, like a successful lawyer. I'm a teenager in like grunge phase of the 90s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was so confused by this. And she was like, me, why am I resilient? And she was so insistent. No, your life has been so hard and you always seem fine. It amazes me that you're resilient. My mother had cancer before I even was born. She had it a couple times when I was younger. She has a genetic form of cancer. She had multiple times been given, less than 6 months to live. She was often in the hospital growing up, because back then in the 80s, they'd put you in the hospital to even do chemo.
Yeah.
She never said, why me? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
She never said, why did this happen to me? Why? She always had goals. She always had something, she was going to accomplish, even if she thought she only had a few months to live. So
for sure. I'm hearing a lot of parallels between what your mom taught you and, when your parent dies when you're young, that's such a turning point as well. It's such an inflection point. But in hearing you talk about caring and putting yourself out there and, working with people less fortunate or working with people who need you or need your help, there's quite a parallel there to jumping to being a doctor. So you mentioned before you were inspired to become a physician in your teens after your mom died of a genetic form of cancer. Let's fast forward to kind of being a physician now, and life for you in relation to COVID. Like, knowing that resilience and being raised in that way, and now seeing a pandemic, right? This is the first kind of big pandemic in your lifetime. What has this been like for you, especially as a human, but then also as a physician?
One of the biggest things is, in some way, we're lucky being physicians and dealing with COVID, because in some ways our life, even though obviously it did change huge, it changed huge in the hospital. Mm-hmm. But in terms of other people, it was like complete isolation. They were going to isolation. They had so much of their connections cut off. In some ways, we were lucky because we didn't. Mm-hmm. And the medical community, even though it was so hard, and I think some of the political aspects of the vaccine made it even harder, because not everyone but physicians more so, but support staff aren't on the same page, weren't necessarily always on the same page. So that made it hard. But for the most part in the medical field, you kind of have that support of each other.
Right.
I don't know how you feel about this, but I know a lot of people say like, oh, things will always work out, or things happen for a reason. That's the one. Like, people who say things happen for a reason, I actually really hate that saying.
Me too. Oh my God, me too.
I hate it so much, because I have to go into the hospital, and what reason am I going to give this person who's, doesn't have long to live, and you're the one having to tell them. I really, really, really hate that. But there's been patients who, they're at the end of their life, and they have it with grace. And
you could kind of highlight for us, what is Kate's mantra? If someone said, what is Kate's mantra? You had an Instagram post and you got to put Kate's mantra. What would it be?
My mantra, that kind of is the tough one. I think always strive for something to be better. I think is the biggest thing. For me, I'm someone who I always have to be I always have to be looking forward to something or trying to achieve a goal, or if not, even if that goal is enjoying, you know, current life and accepting what I can't change,
Right. Yeah.
to have something to do, some goal to have in my life, something to strive for. That to me is always gives me a good outlook, always gives me, you know, a good purpose for life, even
Yeah.
if that goal is appreciating my current life.
I like that. I think a lot of people think mantra has to be like this big billboard thing or something that like no one's ever heard of, but the reality is, you know, the power to learn. One of the things I love about you, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast is, one, you're a very real person, and two, you are always looking for something new. You're curious. You like to try different things. You love design and you love art and you love different cultures. And I think a lot of people sometimes are often just very myopic. They don't think a little bit larger. And I feel like you see the world in color versus just black and white. So I love what you said about your mantra.